And then like the third category of signs is definitely like their moon, not their moon.
Struggle bus,
It's been a long week. This is the Apparently Autistic podcast
where we unmask the spectrum
with real voices.
and real experiences.
We're your hosts, Keith Holloway,
And Bridget Holloway.
and I am apparently autistic. Before we get started, just a quick reminder. We're not experts in anything except our own personal experiences and perspectives.
Be sure to check out the important disclaimers and disclosures in the show notes.
Now let's dive in. All right, here we are, another episode of the Apparently Autistic podcast. What is this, episode 6?
Yep, I think we're on
Episode
6.
6. Yep. I am one of your hosts, Keith Holloway.
And I'm Bridget.
Same last name. I don't know why she doesn't want to claim it, but...
We're all casual around here.
On a first name basis, huh?
That's right.
Anyways, before we get going into this episode, something kind of exciting, kind of silly, I don't know what you want to call it. But we have a merch store. And it isn't so much us trying to cash in on having a podcast as I found out I could set up a merch store, and it was fun.
Yep.
So we've got shirts, we've got mugs, we even have coffee.
That's right.
We'll put a link to it in the description. No pressure at all. It's just, it was more fun for me than anything. Anything we do make will go right back into helping with the cost of the podcast and everything. We're not expecting to make this a business or anything. So
no, just kind of other little fun things and make stuff available for people. So,
so anyways, this week we're going to be talking about autism and mental health.
Which is appropriate because I learned that May is Mental Health Awareness Month in the U.S.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's good.
It's appropriate, right?
Yeah, that is appropriate. Yeah, we totally planned that, right?
Yeah.
But no, we're kind of talking about the intersection between autism and mental health. And just kind of as a warning ahead of time, obviously we're going to be talking about some sensitive topics in this episode. So depression, anxiety, trauma, self-harm.
Yeah.
Are some of the topics we'll discuss.
We'll post some resources for people down in the links. If you think that discussing this might be triggering for you, now's your opportunity to not listen, but we will post some resources either way that'll be available in the show notes. Definitely we don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. So
no. I used several links to get information from this. So yeah, if like hearing it, talking about it or whatever is a problem for you, you can check out all the links.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of good information. As we've said, we're not experts on anything but our own experience. So we lean heavily on articles and stuff written by the experts. And that's especially the case for this episode.
Yeah.
Harvey's just wanting to play, isn't he? Yeah. For those of you just listening, Harvey is our other emotional support dog.
He's a bit of a lumpy dog.
He is a lumpy dog.
You know, it's when he wants to play, it's kind of rare.
Yeah. For sure. All right. So first, I think it's important to understand the difference between neurodivergence and mental illness, because some people think that they're related, they're the same thing. Even in some of the resources that I looked up on here, they talked about ADHD being a mental health condition that is co-occurring with autism, when a lot of other people consider that a neurodivergent condition.
Yeah.
So not a mental health condition.
It's interesting that the lines become really blurred in the medical profession as far as this goes, because we'll talk about it more later. But
because there's still diagnostic criteria, so they pathologize a lot of the things and call it a disorder when it's really a neurotype. So
well, and when you get into the treatment, it's like people specialize in autism or mental health, but the ones who specialize in autism don't specialize in mental health, so it's hard for them to know the difference in, you know, the neurodevelopment of the brain and be able to help treat the depression. So you know, like look at
so like neurodivergence, it refers to innate differences in brain function and cognitive processing. So like it encompasses neurotypes like we said, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, Tourette's syndrome,
Yeah.
and there can be some co-occurrence and some overlapping of those conditions.
Yeah.
My nephew has autism and Tourette's. You hear a lot of people refer to themselves as ADHD, which is a combination between autism and
Mm-hmm.
ADHD. I think I fall into that. I have a daughter who's dyslexic,
Yeah.
so yeah, there's
There's some overlap in some of the symptoms.
for sure. But mental health, it usually refers to difficulties affecting people's thoughts, their moods, and subsequent behaviors. A lot of mental health conditions can be brought on by either chemical imbalances or environmental, like like situations, not like
Yeah.
environment, not like toxins or stuff like
Right.
that, but like just like your
Yeah.
experiences. That's what I
And
was trying to say.
exposures,
Yeah,
like to
exposures
different
and stuff.
life situations and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can affect your brain, obviously, but it's not the same. It's not in the same category.
Right.
And some examples of the mental health issues that we're going to be talking about today we've got is depression and anxiety. Those are probably the two most common overlaps. There's also PTSD, OCD. Those are some other examples of mental
Yeah.
health conditions.
I think we're going to focus on the depression and anxiety today because we could dive into all the different types, but
Right.
we may, get deeper into like OCD or PTSD in a later episode. But
For sure. So, like, why is this conversation critical? Because there's a high rate of mental health diagnosis among autistic individuals, for sure.
yeah. Well, and a lot of that I think is because of the life situations that you go through, the lack of acceptance, the lack of understanding for the way that your brain works, and you thinking something's wrong with you your whole life for, however long until you know what's going on.
Yep.
It's depressing.
Right.
It's
Well, they've estimated that as many as 70% of people on the autism experience or autism spectrum experience co-occurring mental health issues, which is a lot, obviously.
but it makes perfect sense when you really think about it.
Yep, and like we said, anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, even eating disorders are some that are pretty prominent in autistic populations. Some of the other issues and the reasons why it's important is because misdiagnosis is an issue, kind of both ways.
Yeah.
You can be misdiagnosed as depressed when you may not be depressed. And sometimes the problem with that is you get put into treatment for depression. And if you're not depressed, you're autistic. The treatment for depression can actually cause depression.
Right.
Can actually cause you to have some of the mental health issues that they sent you in there to treat, because you can't treat autism with depression treatments.
Well, and the other way around, autistic people tend to need different types of treatments for depression.
Right.
So if you don't have somebody that knows about autism treating the depression, then
Right.
you could be making things worse too.
Yep, exactly. And especially like when you have someone who's high masking, lower support needs, they, someone that would be called high functioning by some people who think functioning labels are a good idea. Yeah, you're less likely, they're less likely to be diagnosed as autistic and more likely to be seen as some other mental health condition. Another one of the issues, another reasons it's important, the way society treats autistic people is a big cause of the mental health issues that come up. Masking fatigue can lead to depression. The bullying,
Yeah.
mistreatment, exploitation, abuse of autistic people will obviously lead to depression. It can lead to PTSD. It can lead to anxiety. If you're constantly treated bad, you're going to be anxious about meeting new people because you don't have a good track record of how new people treat you.
Right.
All of that, of course, can lead to loneliness. If you don't fit
Yeah.
in with others, or you feel like like you're mistreated, you're more likely to be lonely, which of course leads to depression.
Yeah.
And again, just the systemic misunderstanding and discrimination against anyone who's different.
Right.
And it applies to autistics, but it applies to anyone who's different. There's just
Yeah.
this intolerance
Yeah. Lack of
to
understanding.
difference.
So when you don't understand it, it's easier to just cast it out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So again, some of the co-occurring conditions that the ones that we're going to talk about today, we're going to be focusing on depression and anxiety, mainly because, like we said, PTSD, OCD, we don't have as much
Firsthand
direct firsthand
experience.
experience with
Yeah.
that. We definitely have a lot of experience with depression and anxiety, though.
Yeah.
And from both of us, like we've both
Right.
dealt with that, and so we have experience from a neurodivergent viewpoint and
Right.
from a neurotypical viewpoint.
Yep.
So they have found that autistic people are 4 times more likely to experience depression than non-autistic people.
Crazy.
And that's kind of
I can't say it surprises me, but
right.
that's a big
It's a
difference.
It's a big difference. Again, this comes from the strain of navigating a world that's not made for them.
Yeah.
Like that right there can be depressing. There's this expectation that, well, you should change to fit the world,
Yeah.
or you should change for our comfort, or you should change because whatever, instead of making the world a more inclusive space for everybody.
Or why am I not good enough for people to accommodate
Right.
me? I have to accommodate everybody else every time. So it's like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Why don't people care about me enough to do that for me?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it can be several different things.
And again, that leads to loneliness. You feel like you're misunderstood or not heard at all.
Yep.
I can definitely relate to that. You feel like nobody's listening to what your needs are,
Yeah.
or what what
you finally find your voice, or you're working on finding your voice, and you get brave enough to speak up about what your needs are and what is going on with you, and you're not being heard.
Yep.
Like, talk about getting shut down
Yeah.
and being like super depressed about it because you were trying to find this voice, and you're like, this is what I really actually need, and suddenly it's like, no.
Yeah, you get shot down. Either I'm not going to do that for you, or
No, you don't really need it.
You don't really need that. You're
Yeah.
not really autistic, or hey, we all have problems.
Yeah.
Buck up, kind of thing. Yeah, and that all can lead you to feel pretty lonely.
Right.
And again, being bullied, being exploited, being abused, especially. I mean, obviously, when you're being bullied, you're being bullied. But a part of my journey with my late diagnosis was going through a really depressive state of realizing, like looking back and identifying more and more instances where I was being exploited or just misused or mistreated,
Yeah.
taken advantage of, where either my trusting nature was taken advantage of, or even when I was, used just for other people's enjoyment.
Convenience.
Yeah.
What was convenient? Yeah.
For sure. So, some ways that depression is going to look different among autistic people. They're not necessarily going to report feelings of sadness. A lot of times your depression is caused by the fact that you've reported those in the past and nobody's listened.
Yeah.
So you're maybe a lot less likely to
Speak up about
to
it.
speak up about it. It also can be because we have trouble making connections between our feelings and what that means.
Right.
So we may not even fully understand that that's what's happening to us as it
Because
is.
you process it differently. So what is sadness? Like, I can describe sadness to you, but it doesn't feel the same to you because
Right.
you're processing it differently. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
It might manifest though as insomnia or fatigue, emotional dysregulation. That's common anyways, but if it seems to be like just you're really struggling to regulate your emotions, or if you notice someone who is autistic in your life really struggling to regulate their emotions, that's a good sign. And just like an extended or seemingly endless burnout.
Yeah.
Like if it seems like someone's in burnout and they're just not coming out of it,
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that can definitely be a good sign about depression.
Yeah. And I think there's been situations in the past where, in fact, I can think of one recently, but I've looked at the kids and been like, okay, we're in a bad cycle right now. We need to break out of it. Like, he hasn't slept well for days. He's not regulating well right now. So, like, we have to find a way to break this cycle.
Yeah.
It's just, recognizing those signs and trying to help intervene or interrupt that cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kind of see if you can identify maybe things that are contributing to it. And
Yeah, and the more familiar you are with the person, the easier that's going to be, because it's like you said, sometimes the signs and things you look for of somebody being depressed are them like kind of secluding themselves,
Mhm.
but for an autistic person that could be like a normal way of them self-regulating. So
Yeah.
being more familiar with the person is helpful, but if you're not familiar with the person, just trying to communicate and, hey,
Yeah.
do you just need some time alone? Is there something I can do for you?
Yeah.
And hopefully they can express that to you.
Hmm. Now, it's kind of a topic that is important to talk about when you're talking about depression, but it's a really difficult topic, is like self-harm.
Mm-hmm.
And we debated about whether we want to say the word, um, but I think suicide is an important topic to talk about.
Yeah.
And
It's the reality that we face.
mhm.
So, I mean, it's important to talk about what we're looking for and what the resources are,
Mhm.
you know.
Um, and it is one of the top three causes of death for autistic people, especially those without intellectual disabilities.
Which is also crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty high. Um, and some of the issues, difficulty recognizing signs of depression, and someone who may be leaning towards that, um, among typical autistic traits, like you said, isolation is a very important sign for depression and someone who may be feeling like harming themselves. But again, for autistic people, that sometimes is a form of self care.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we just need time to ourselves. We need to isolate ourselves.
Yeah.
So, again, like you said, knowing the person, if you know the person, you can tell, hopefully, is the self care, are they isolating to feel better and then they come out and feel better? Or are they just always isolating
Yeah.
and nothing seems to be.
Or reaching out to somebody that maybe knows them better. Like,
Hmm.
say, if it's a neighbor or somebody and you notice that they've been really closed in lately, like, is there a family member or a friend that you know that knows them better that you could reach out to and be like, hey, I've noticed some
Yeah.
differences here. Do we need to check on them? Is this normal for them?
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's definitely, it's easier for people who know the
Right.
person better. Some of these signs are general signs,
Mm-hmm.
but again, like we said, if you know them better, you can hopefully tell the difference between their normal self-care isolation and their, you know, depressed isolation, or
Right.
some of the other signs. There's like three categories of warning signs to look for, especially amongst autistics, that can help. The first category is like verbal. If they mention self-harm, obviously that's a big
Mm-hmm.
sign.
Right.
But mentioning, talking about feeling hopeless,
Yeah.
um, having no reason to live, feeling like they're a burden to everybody.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things they say that people talk about is plans for the future. Like, are they talking about next week or
Hmm.
something that's going on next month or next year, or their plans for the future, or are they not
Or
even?
if you mention something about the future and they say, "What's the point?"
Yeah,
That can sometimes be a sign.
definitely some red flags, but the language that they're using and the way that they're framing things
Hmm.
time wise can be a big hint.
Yep. Just like if they express that they feel trapped in a situation, or they just might just express that they're in pain,
Yeah.
and they just don't see an end to that. That's a big sign. So those are some of the verbal signs. Then
Yep.
there's behavioral signs. An increase in substance use, alcohol or drug use. Unfortunately, yeah,
Self-medicating.
it's a self-medicating thing. It's a maladaptive approach to try to feel better, and
Hmm.
obviously it doesn't really help. So if they drink and suddenly you notice them drinking a lot more,
Yeah.
then that's a problem. If they start researching forms of self harm,
Yeah.
methods of self harm, obviously that's a big sign,
Red flags.
right?
Yeah.
Again, unusual withdrawal or isolation. This is something that again is going to have to be something that somebody
Person
who knows
dependent.
them,
Yeah.
knows that it's different.
Hmm.
Significant changes in their sleep behavior. Autistic people may not always have the most normal, quote unquote, normal sleep schedule, but they have a schedule that's normal for them.
Yeah.
So if you see a huge change in their sleeping behaviors, or it becomes more erratic, that's
Yeah.
always an important sign. Um, if they start just like saying goodbye to people, giving away possessions, these are
Yeah.
common signs of, whether you're
Yeah.
autistic or not.
Like making final arrangements, like, okay, who's going to take care of my pets, or who's
Mm-hmm.
going to get my house or my car, like, even
Yeah.
if it's smaller things, like if it's their special interest,
Yeah. If they
like
start
giving away.
talking a lot
Yeah.
about what's going to happen when they're gone and
Yeah.
wanting to make plans, and that's
Hmm.
more than just like making a will or something like that, but
Yeah.
like where it seems like they're suddenly very concerned about that, that's
Yeah.
definitely a sign.
I mean, there probably is other signs to go along with it, but you could get pretty deep and involved in planning for something like that to happen to you, even if you're not
Yeah,
wanting your life to end. So you just feeling the situation out and talking to
right.
them. Okay, are we doing this so that you're not leaving your family with it when something happens? Or are we doing this because you feel like it's, you're not wanting to be here anymore?
But yeah, like you said, like these aren't necessarily one of these signs means that there's an issue. Combinations of these signs,
Yeah.
or like an extreme
Well, and they all
example of these
require
signs.
follow-ups, but
Yeah.
we're looking for warning signs, things that need to be followed up on.
So the third category of signs is people's mood. So like changes in their depression or anxiety. If you see it seems to be getting worse than normal,
Yeah.
because unfortunately depression and anxiety are pretty common. So it may not be abnormal, but if something seems to be agitating it more or whatever,
Yeah.
if they suddenly have a loss of interest, especially in their special
I was going to
interests,
say, if they have
yeah,
a special interest that they're very interested in and they're not showing
they
any
just suddenly
interest,
don't
it's,
care.
no.
Yeah. Irritability,
Hmm.
feelings of shame, agitation, anger, sometimes even just a sudden marked improvement of mood.
Hmm.
I I remember a case, not a case, but like just people that I knew whose son had taken his own life, and that was one of the things they realized after the fact, that he suddenly felt like was acting like he felt better because he had made that decision. And it's a strange sign, but it's one
Yeah.
that's important to
It's
look
an
at.
interesting
Yeah.
perspective, one that you don't really think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like I said, that's kind of a difficult topic to talk about. It's kind of
Yeah.
taboo in some people's minds, but it's important. It's an important topic, especially since it's one that affects the neurodivergent community
Yeah.
so heavily.
Well, and I think the biggest thing is, like, if you're feeling down, if you're feeling upset about something, the the first thing, like the first step is just to talk to somebody. I know that I did 13 years of 911 and I never took a call from somebody who said that they were feeling that way and was upset or annoyed that I had to take their call. Like, that's what they're there for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they may not have the answers for you, but they can send you. Unfortunately, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later. Unfortunately, most of the time in our this is the way our system's set up, is going to be officers,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes fire and EMS, and they can get you to a hospital, which
Mm-hmm.
is where you can start reaching out to social
Right.
workers and mental health workers and, make sure that either someone's there with you that can express your neurodivergent needs or that you're able to so that you can get the actual help that you need.
Right.
But the first step is just speaking up, saying something, because nobody's going to be upset that you're asking for help.
Right. And there's a big difference between a crisis of self-harm, like where someone is likely to cause self-harm, versus a crisis of like a meltdown,
Oh,
like
yeah.
a big meltdown. And unfortunately, like we'll talk about later, situations where meltdowns are treated like different crises, and law enforcement gets involved when they have zero training, and it turns into a tragedy.
Yeah.
So, I would not recommend calling 911 for someone who's melting down, because
Right.
that's just not. But if it's a case of you fear someone's going to harm themselves
Yeah.
and that's their intention, then getting immediate help to protect them first
Yeah.
is
And
important.
while we're on the subject, I didn't plan to go down this road, but for caregivers and support people, I think it's important, if you're in that situation and you do call for help, let the person you're talking to know, this is an autistic person we're working with. These, they're being triggered right now. These are some of their, if they're triggered by police officers or people in uniform, or if there's something that they can do or say, or what name they should call them, things that can help these responders walk into the situation more equipped to actually de-escalate it instead of
Right.
making it worse.
Right.
And the dispatcher or the call taker, whoever you're talking to, should be willing to take that information because it's helping their people
Right.
to help you. So don't be afraid to speak up and say that, when you first call in, this is what we're dealing with. This is, this is the situation, and this is a trigger for them.
Right.
Or,
Because even in some of the most tragic situations where there was just actions taken that should not have been taken, I don't believe that those involved wanted it to
no,
end up that way, and they would gladly accept any information that could help them better handle a situation that doesn't
right,
end in tragedy.
right.
So yeah, anything that you can give, any information that you can give to help, is going to make it better for everybody involved, for sure.
Yeah,
It's a really tricky. It's a tricky thing to talk about, because
right.
one of the issues that we'll talk about when we're talking about barriers to getting help or whatever is the lack of education amongst those that are there to respond to
And in
issues.
most cases, to no fault of their own, it's just not available to them. It's
Right.
not part of their training.
Right.
So it's the lack of resources and getting the proper people to respond, the actual mental health experts, the
Right.
actual people that can deal with it. So
We just don't have a system set up for that. And when there was talk of trying to put some kind of system like that in place, there were some people that even like scoffed at that. Oh, well, what's a counselor going to do in this situation? Well, a lot of times there's things they can do that are better
Yeah.
than what a police officer can do, or what a firefighter can do, or
Yeah.
yeah. So I think, like, obviously there's so much we could talk about that, and I don't want to say I think we've covered enough.
Yeah, you can always talk about more. But I mean,
But
if there's questions that people have from the emergency services perspective, I mean, feel free to, like, comment, ask questions, send us a message, whatever you want to do. He has the perspective from both
yeah,
911 call taking and being a firefighter and EMT for several years. And then I have more than a decade of 911 call take experience in many different situations. So, I mean, we're happy to at least give you our perspective on those. Again, we're not professionals and we're not speaking for your individual departments where you live, because policies and, response procedures could be different from department to department. But we'll do our best to help you answer those questions or understand.
and we can maybe talk a little bit more about that when we get to that kind of topic, later.
Okay. Yeah.
We can even we can talk about some of our own personal experiences and things for sure.
Yeah.
But we'll move on to talking about anxiety, because that's the other kind of major co-occurring condition that we can definitely speak on. And anxiety disorders affect 40 to 84% of autistic children. That
It's a wide
depends on the
range.
different. Yeah. The source that I found said 40, and then it said even some estimated as high as 84%. It is a wide range, but it's like believable.
And it's hard to pinpoint
Right.
what's what. And we kind of touched on that is,
Right.
separating things is,
And when you compare that to neurotypical children, 25% of neurotypical children experience anxiety disorders. So it's definitely elevated, whether it's 40 or 84%.
yeah.
And when it comes to overall autistic people, anxiety disorders affect 70% of autistic people.
Yeah.
So I think you can see as you get older, if you didn't have anxiety as a child, you
Those life experiences
it,
build
yep,
up and
everything builds up
Yeah.
and increases. And we'll kind of talk about what can lead to that. The issue with anxiety and autism is that some symptoms of autism can masquerade as anxiety, like social issues and stuff like that, and vice versa.
Yep.
So that definitely makes diagnosis of either difficult. Again, that's where the overlap kind of has some issues with misdiagnosis one way or the other, or maybe you're diagnosing one when both are an issue and
Right.
need to be addressed. One of the most common forms of anxiety amongst autistic people is what someone called anticipation anxiety.
Yeah.
And basically, it's this feeling of panic or dread that always comes before doing something new.
I usually refer to it to at least one of our children
Yeah.
that has this as fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Like it's a new situation and you kind of know what you're doing, but you have no idea what to expect because it's all new.
Mm-hmm. And fear of the unknown is not, exclusive to neurodivergent people,
Yeah.
but it's at a whole nother level.
Yeah.
It can be paralyzing. It can be, cause
crippling.
extreme, crippling. And it could be things like meeting new people, going to a new school, starting a new job,
Yep. Moving.
even just trying new food,
Yeah.
going to a new restaurant. I'll be honest, if we're going to a new restaurant, if I can't find a menu, I'm going to be anxious.
Ahead of time.
I would like to be able to find a menu ahead of time, see
Make
what
sure
they
there's
have.
something there that you're going to
Yep.
be interested in.
Be like, okay,
Yep.
if, some of this I'm not sure about, but this thing sounds familiar, sounds like something I would like, I want to be able to plan ahead of time.
Yep.
And some of that's autistic traits, and some of it's anxiety related, and some of it's both.
Well, and you can ask those questions if somebody's having that anxiety of, okay, we're going to this new restaurant for this family birthday party. What about it's bothering you? If I've looked up a menu online, most of the menus that these days are available online.
Yeah.
So if I looked up a menu online and we looked it over and made sure that there was something there that you can eat, would that help you feel more comfortable going into the situation? Even if it's just one part of their anxiety,
Yeah.
that might make them more comfortable.
Easing just a little bit of it to
Take one thing
make
off
them
of their
willing
plate.
to go to it, because
Yeah.
this anticipation anxiety can cause an extreme resistance to do the new thing, outright refusal, paralyzing fear, just can't do it.
Yeah.
Like you said, our son, I think anticipation anxiety played into it a lot when we were talking about when we'd go to amusement parks and riding roller coasters. When he was little and not big enough to ride the roller coasters, he talked a big game.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to ride this, and I'm going to ride this,
would
and this, and
trash talk
this.
his
Oh,
siblings.
yeah. Oh, I'm going to ride this, and, whatever. And then when he was finally tall enough, he was not sure he wanted to. Well, I mean, we know him.
Yeah.
And we knew, we could tell, if you ride this, you'll enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So we went, and, there were even a couple of rides where, we just put him in the seat, and he was not happy leaving the station, but he had a big grin on his face coming back.
Yeah.
He enjoyed it, and we knew he would. And we probably had some people thinking we were bad parents, and maybe some people watching this or listening to this might think we're bad
That
parents.
was one or two trips to the theme
Yeah.
park the year that when we had season tickets, so we went all the time. But
Yeah.
after that, like a couple times of him experiencing it, we kind of just backed off. We
Yep.
were like,
We were just
okay,
all right.
just let him do his thing. He can like it or not like it, but he's experienced it now, so we'll let him decide.
Yeah.
And then
Because the forcing it doesn't, like, again, that was also at a time where we were less experienced parents.
right.
We didn't fully understand. I don't think we like knew he was ADHD or didn't understand
Yeah.
neurodivergence very well, even
I
if
think
we
it was
did.
more that.
So we didn't realize that that probably wasn't the best thing to help his anxiety. Kind of just
No.
push him into it.
Yeah, looking back,
Backing
probably
off
could have
and
handled it better.
backing off and letting him kind of go at his own pace is definitely the better route to do.
Yeah.
And I think when we went to Disneyland recently, like he rode everything that we rode.
Yeah.
He rode
Couple
Space
months ago.
Mountain. He rode a Matterhorn.
He told his older brother, I'm not going to say this to them because they're going to be like, I told you so.
Yeah.
But I'm actually starting to like these rides.
Yep. And that's good because like I remember being the same way.
Yeah.
I was scared to death to ride more serious rides. And I think we talked about it in the last episode about when I went to Busch Gardens my senior year of high school, and I pretty much felt pressured into riding these rides
Like
with my
peer
friend.
pressure.
Yeah.
Kids your age, your friends.
And I rode like one of these, it was like the craziest ride I've ever ridden, probably to this day still. Had 7 inversions.
Yeah.
And I came off that thing going, oh man, I love this. Like I was suddenly an adrenaline
Yeah.
junkie when it came to riding roller coasters. And I wanted him to get to that spot.
Yeah.
And
The
I probably
timing just has
pushed it
to
a
be
little
right.
more. Yeah.
I didn't like roller coasters till I was probably, it was either my senior year or after high school. Like I was pretty old too when I finally got brave enough to start riding things. So I think that's a pretty normal progression.
And like we talked about too, you parent long enough, you realize some of the mistakes you made. Like, I mean, he's at the end of his sophomore year. I still wasn't riding rides like
Yeah.
he was willing to ride at Disneyland by that point. So, yeah.
And the realization that some people just never like roller coasters, and maybe he's one of
Well,
those.
we
and
knew
that's okay
that
too.
once he
did
rode them,
enjoy
he
it once
enjoyed
rode
it. Like
them.
we knew that.
But should we
And
have known that? I don't know.
Maybe not. Well, and I like I've said, every time I go to an amusement park, especially like when we lived in Ohio and we'd go to Kings Island, the first ride I always wanted to ride was the Banshee. And that was
good
was like our favorite ride. It's smooth. It has a lot of inversions.
We got tricked into that ride the first time we rode it. A little bit of light for our episode, but we had taken our oldest daughter there, and because she was visiting for the summer, and
Was it just us and her? It wasn't. It wasn't
I want to say it was just us and her.
Yeah.
And we waited in line, and it was the first year this ride opened, and the line was long. We waited in line
really
for,
wanted to ride it,
she
and we were
did.
like, oh, okay,
we were
we'll
like,
ride it with
we'll
you.
ride
We
it just so
weren't
you
sure.
can ride it, but we'll wait. And we waited in this like hour and a half long line, and we get up to the front of the station of the ride, and she gets wide-eyed as we're going to get on the ride, and she's like, I can't do it. I'm not going to ride it. And we're like, that's okay. Just go over there to the exit, and we'll see you when we get off, because she was, like well into her teen years, so she was old enough to just wait for us to ride the ride. And we will sit in the seats and pull down the shoulder harnesses and look over at each other like, what just happened?
Well, we were going up the lift.
Yeah.
And we did that. We're like, wait a minute.
we just got tricked into this.
We didn't even
weren't-
want to ride.
Yeah, we weren't coming here for us.
Yeah. But we loved it. Like,
Oh my gosh,
that was a
I'm so
great
glad
ride.
we rode that.
Yeah, but like what I was getting at is like, no matter how many times I ride that ride, the first ride I ride it, on a day at an amusement park, going up that hill, I have this, what am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
I have this voice in my head that's like, what in the world are you doing? Like, it's that anxiety still. It's
Yeah.
that fear. As soon as you crest the hill, especially on that one, like you crest it and you do a turn into a dive, and the adrenaline just kicks in,
Yeah.
and it's like, shut up to the, to that voice. And it's pure fun. And I try to explain, to our youngest son, like, we all still feel that way.
Yeah.
Like, even being in line, I have this voice going, this is stupid. What are you doing? But then once you get going, like the joy, the adrenaline, the rush of it
Yeah.
takes over.
I think probably only in recent years, maybe even since the kids got older, have I gotten to the point where I'm like, I can just get on any ride. Like,
Yeah.
there was when we went to Hollywood Studios several years back, the kids were younger, and two of them wanted to ride the Tower of Terror, and the rest did not, and you did not.
Hmm.
And we didn't want to let those two, because they were young enough that you
Yeah.
didn't want to leave them alone. We didn't want to let them wait in line by themselves. And so I said, okay, I'll ride it so they can ride it. And got on the ride. I didn't care to ride it, but oh my gosh, when I got on it, it was a bunch of fun.
Yeah.
So it's, I kind of reached that point where I can almost get on anything. But like you said, when you first get there, that there's that anxiety. Even for me, I still have some level of anxiety in the beginning.
I don't do drop rides.
Yeah.
I just don't like the feeling of my stomach being in my throat. Like that's and especially when it like that one, Tower of Terror, there's no pattern to learn. There's no way you can anticipate when you're going to drop, when you're going to go back up. You're dropping faster than free fall. Like that one, I've ridden it before.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that was like cool, but
Kudos
not
to you
at the
for
same time.
trying it. If it's something you don't like, it's like we said, some people just don't like it.
Yeah.
But I have to say, the Guardians of the Galaxy free themed ride,
Yeah.
it's the same type of ride.
That's
But
the one at Disneyland.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the theming, but
Yeah.
oh my gosh, when we went there a few months ago, that was way better than I remember Tower of Terror being.
Yeah, you
We
guys rode
we really
that like
liked
3
that.
or 4 times, didn't you?
I think we only got on it twice. We wanted to go a
twice?
third time, but we didn't have time for it. So
But yeah, at Disney World, the two that you rode with, they're like our fearless kids. My youngest daughter will,
And my
like
oldest
she
son.
wanted, yeah, and your oldest son, they'll ride anything.
oh yeah, caution to the wind, and
Anything,
here we
yeah.
go.
Sometimes it's scary because it's like you should have some fear for something.
Yeah, someday
They're
you're gonna
pretty
hug a
fearless.
grizzly bear, and it's not gonna go well.
Right. Anyways, I think that we got out a little bit on a
Yeah,
light sidetrack, but
that's how we deal with depression and trauma, like stress, anxiety. We
Yep.
try to make things lighter. Maybe that's a subconscious thing that we just did.
maybe. Well, it kind of we can get right back on track because we're talking about being anxious about doing these things and then doing them.
Yeah.
And the issue with anticipation anxiety amongst autistic people is successfully doing the thing you were anxious about does not reduce your anticipation anxiety for another new thing. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I tried this new thing. I was really anxious. I tried it, worked out fine. I enjoy it. That doesn't make you go, I will no longer be anxious about new things.
Yeah.
Like you'll still continue to have that anticipation anxiety, unfortunately. Probably not for the same thing because it's not new anymore.
Yeah. And more
But,
familiar. Yeah.
But yeah,
But
for other
new
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also just general anxiety that is very common among autistics. And there's a lot of like real specific reasons that are pretty specific to autistic people. And sometimes it's just a matter of feeling like something's off. And I've had that before. I've told you, like something just feels off. I can't explain it,
Yeah.
but something's off.
Right.
Part of that could be because of our difficulty understanding our body's own sensory cues.
Yeah.
Like we can feel that something's wrong. We can't identify it.
There's a lot of times that it'll be like we need to do certain things, or even just get dinner for the night, or figure out what we're having for dinner, and you've gotten better over the years at expressing your needs in certain situations, but you'll just look at me and be like, I just can't make that decision tonight. Whatever you want to do is fine. I am not in a mental space right now to do it. And then I know, okay, I just decide and do it. And
Well, especially if you're already feeling anxious and you're confused as to why you're anxious, that just
right.
throws your whole mind into confusion. So you can't, it makes it harder to make any other decisions on top of that,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Your brain's already occupied elsewhere.
Another cause of just this general anxiety that we can't necessarily identify the problem is our mind's ability to make connections. We, like, autistic minds are constantly making connections, constantly doing things. So our mind might be connecting our current situation to a past experience
Yeah.
And we're not consciously making that connection, but our mind is like, this feels familiar.
A subconscious
Yeah, a
connection.
subconscious connection
Yeah.
to this, like this feels familiar or similar to this other situation that didn't end up going well.
It's just like think deja vu,
Mm-hmm.
but it's in the back of your brain and you don't even realize it's going on.
Right. Yeah, because again, it might be one of those things where in a neurotypical person they can better identify that, but for us, it's just we know something's off.
Yeah.
We may not be able to know what that connection is, but something's off.
Yeah.
And then there's just like if you have, especially if you have an extensive history of being mistreated, bullied, abused, exploited, for your autistic traits, that just sets you up to feel like that's just how the world goes. So you're always anxious. You're always looking for that. You have this general anxiety of, what's the next thing that's going to happen? The next way I'm going to be treated
Yeah.
badly or something like that.
Yeah.
And it also just like you might have this perceived pattern of things are going good now, and that's a problem because good times don't last.
Yeah.
If you have a pattern, like I said, I had seen a pattern in my life of things are going okay, but then something builds and builds and builds and builds, and then there's the massive explosion and everything goes to hell.
Yeah.
And that's a real pattern that I have identified in my life. And so that's what can cause anxiety when things are going well, because now it's like, okay, I've seen this before.
Well, and in a late diagnosed autistic person or somebody like in our case where I came into your life later after you'd had a lot of those experiences, it can seem categorically unfair to a person. Like sometimes I feel like, or I would in the past, I kind of understand it better now, but it felt like I was being held to your reactions for something somebody else did to you.
Yeah.
And like, how is that a fair judgment on me?
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't do those things, but you don't know that. And the patterns, your life experience has showed you that that's what's going to happen over and over again. So I think that it's important as a neuro anchor or care person that we just try to be patient and understand that, but also just remain consistent because the only way that we're going to prove that we're the person that's going to break the cycle is to be the person that breaks the cycle.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I can say to you that's going to take that out of your mind that that's a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Just continually be that neuro anchor that they need. Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the challenges, like we talked about, facing autistic individuals and families, in dealing with some of these co-occurring conditions? There are very few mental health clinicians that have a good understanding of autism specifically, and even more so how that, how autism and mental health overlap, how that, what that intersection looks like, what things to expect.
Yeah. And again, if you just go to a mental health clinician for an underlying issue, say abuse or something that happened to, like, say a child abuse. Say if you go to a mental health clinician for child abuse and you get somebody that's very well versed and knows their stuff, the method that they use to treat and process that with the patient could be completely different for a neurodiverse person. And if they don't know that and they're not aware of those differences, it could actually make the situation worse.
Right.
And the trauma worse. So that lack of overlap or, integration in that mental health care system can be very difficult to navigate.
Yeah. Well, and I had a personal experience that kind of like really opened my eyes about the disparity in knowledge of neurodivergence amongst mental health professionals. When, looking for a new counselor out here, and I went to a counselor. He's an older guy, wasn't even doing it full time anymore. And I, told him that I was autistic, and he was like, "Well, who told you that?" The typical response that I get from some people. And I was like, "Well, I was diagnosed by a counselor that I had." And he made some comment about how, "Oh, that's the trendy diagnosis." And I was already pretty much thinking in my mind, I'm not coming back. And then at the end of the appointment, he declared, as though he was doing me a favor, that he didn't think I was autistic because, quote, you obviously care very strongly about your family, and autistic people generally only care about themselves. That was what he told me.
I think you're mixing up your diagnosis
Right.
there.
Um, yeah. And this is someone who had been in the mental health
Yeah.
field for decades.
And really, it's just sad because it just means that being neurodiverse makes it harder to find. And it's already difficult to find mental health care and just add that extra layer to it. And, it goes back to the why does it get depressing? Why do people try to self medicate?
Well, and the eye opening thing was, I have a brother who's a clinical psychologist. And I asked him, is there some kind of continuing education requirement for different topics, for different things, particularly for autism? And he's like, there's no requirement that mental health professionals learn anything about autism or neurodivergence or anything. A lot of times it's just a number of hours that they're supposed to
they get to pick
get
the
continuing
subject.
education, but they pick the subject. So if they don't ever do any kind of continuing education about autism or neurodivergence, they're not going to really understand that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was kind of eye opening to me. I'm like, it's interesting that that's not something that they're expected to understand. And
They have to want to know neurodivergence and be interested in
And
specializing in that.
yeah, and I know that there's plenty out there that do that. And
Yeah.
that may just be the only solution, is to seek those out specifically.
Yeah.
It was definitely eye opening though.
Yeah. I mean, it's something to be aware of and something that I didn't even realize. Marriage counselors in some of the support groups I'm in, people say it's very hard to find marriage counselors that understand autism because it can make the dynamic in an already difficult marriage far worse if they don't. So you're going into this counseling trying to help your situation and things aren't getting better and you don't understand why.
Right. Well, and there might be situations where if they don't understand that one of the spouses is neurodivergent, and the other spouse explains something that they've done, they might be, oh, that's terrible. That crosses a line or something. It's like, no, you don't understand. There's a different intention behind it. There's a different there's more dynamics involved.
Right.
Than
The communication
just black
is
and
different.
white.
Yeah.
Another one of them is the systems and resources and services available for both are usually separated. So
Right.
there's Department of Disability Services that would usually, or Developmental Disability Services that would handle services for autistic people. And then there's Mental Health Services that is often under a completely different department. And so those are kind of like separated, and there's not overlap. There's not interconnectivity. There's not cooperation necessarily between those two.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to find a mental health specialist that understands autism, or an autism specialist that can help with the mental health aspects of it.
Yeah.
And if you've got co-occurring conditions, you need someone who understands both of them. You can't
Right.
go to this person for the autistic part and go to this person for the depression part, because
They're
they need to both
very much
understand what's going on.
piggybacking each other. Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely an issue. Educational support is a big issue. There's never enough funding for education in the first place.
Right.
Our
And then you
schools
get
are
into special needs and it's
our schools are very underfunded. We don't have enough specialists in schools that can help address the issues, help neurodivergent students navigate the situations that are going on. Recent attacks on the Department of Education, defunding things, trying to completely shut down the department. Some people think that that's a good thing because they consider it government waste. No, this is like, we already are not funding our education like we need to. We already do not have the resources that we need. And when you dismantle that, you're getting rid of regulations that protect students. You're getting rid of some of the programs that we have that we may not have all the programs we need, but we certainly don't need to be reducing the number of programs
Yeah.
that we have to help people. And that, like, all of that is really scary to parents of neurodivergent kids.
Right.
Like, even in our case, our youngest son, he has an IEP, and it's enough of a struggle as it is before we start talking about dismantling these regulations and
Right.
these different things that are in place. Talking about, like, just educating people in the educational field. The one 504 meeting that we had where the vice principal made the
Yeah, I was
comment, "Oh,
gonna
we're
say,
all a little
he has a
autistic."
504, not an IEP, but
Yeah, is that what I was saying?
yeah.
But yeah, just and well-meaning vice principal, but
Yeah.
just not educated enough to understand saying something like we're all a little autistic is very ignorant.
Yeah.
And when you're saying that to people who understand neurodivergence, that reduces our trust that everything's being handled the way it needs to be handled.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and coming from trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, like coming from an educator's perspective of he probably has a large amount of his student body that is undiagnosed and doesn't have the resources or the support at home to get diagnosed and get the support they need. So him taking that perspective maybe helps them feel like, okay, I'm not alone. So I don't know, giving him a little bit of the benefit of a doubt that way.
it could also be that he's undiagnosed.
Right.
Because what's a very common thing? You hear parents might tell their kids, "Well, I do that and I'm not autistic." Well, actually you are.
Yeah.
So if you think, "Oh, we're all like this," but it's not something that everyone is like,
Yeah.
that could be something too. But again, education, understanding is like the key to not fixing all of that, but to helping with those resources.
Yeah.
And then, like we were talking about earlier, resources in a crisis situation.
Yeah.
And specifically what we're talking about here is meltdowns, burnouts. Because again,
Situations that become physically dangerous.
physically dangerous, or even just might appear physically dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like we said, when an autistic person is in meltdown, they've lost control. And that can have physical aspects to it.
Right.
But it's not the same thing as somebody who is, choosing to be a danger to other people or whatever. So you can't handle it the same way. The problem is that in an extreme crisis, what resources do people have? 911 or taking someone to the emergency room.
Right.
And neither of those are great options for dealing with someone who's in meltdown. And
Right.
the other problem is that even if you can recognize that your child is melting down and that this is not something that the police need to get involved in, neighbors may not realize that. People
Right,
who
they may
aren't
call.
familiar with the autistic
Yeah.
person may call. And that was unfortunately what happened in Pocatello, Idaho back in April. We had a case of a nonverbal autistic teen who was melting down, was in his family's backyard, had a knife, and a neighbor called 911. And the police showed up and apparently ordered him to drop the knife. He didn't, and they opened fire within 12 seconds of showing up on scene.
Yeah.
And that's a tragedy that didn't need to happen.
Right. I think that there's and again, comes down to resources and education. Like what do you do in those situations? But people get put in really hard situations of, I have this autistic child and they have meltdowns, and now they're this autistic 16, 17, 18-year-old adult size person that outweighs me and outsizes me. And when they get like that, I don't have any way to protect them or anybody else in the household. So it becomes a dangerous situation for somebody, even if it's protecting the autistic person from themselves. Like, it becomes a dangerous situation. So people feel like they're left with no choice. And it comes back to training, education, awareness, all of those things. Like, we could do a lot better. So in those situations, people that feel like they're left with no choice don't feel like that's a bad option.
Yeah. I think a lot of people will agree that Training first responders is very important. And one of the things that a lot of people will agree needs to be better trained to law enforcement is de-escalation.
Yeah.
And I'm
For different types of,
yeah, for a lot of different situations. And
yeah.
better understanding the situations that could be causing the situations that they need to de-escalate.
Yeah.
There's no great answer except education, education, education.
Yeah.
And that may not fix everything, but there's always more to learn. There's always
right.
more to understand. There's already always more education.
We still should strive to be the best that we can be, and we have room to improve.
Right.
That's really what that comes
Absolutely.
down to.
If you are just learning that someone in your family is autistic, learn everything you can about it. Schools, teachers. I know that they're already spread thin,
Yeah.
but the more we can educate the educators, the principals, the counselors, everybody
And the
about
more resources we can
yeah,
give them.
and the more resources we can give them for sure.
Yeah.
Public safety. I know there's a lot better education that could be given on a lot of things. One of the other examples I wanted to give, when I was a firefighter, we had what we called a frequent flyer, which is people that we respond
Get
to
familiar
often.
with.
And this gentleman was an alcoholic. He was suffering from depression. We all knew him by name. We knew his address. If we were even dispatched in the general area of his house, we figured that's probably who we were going on. And law enforcement was tired of it. A lot of my coworkers were tired of it. It just felt like a lot of them treated him like a nuisance.
He liked when you worked, though.
Right. Because I had a lot of experience with depression. I had a lot of experience with mental crises. And I saw that for what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't see him as just another drunk. He usually was drunk, but there was
he's
more behind it.
impaired.
There was an
Yeah.
issue. There was something that made him drink.
Yeah.
And if I was on the medic, sometimes there were times where I came in on, I was on the engine and I said, I'll ride in the back to the hospital with him because I knew, I don't want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back of him, but I knew how to talk to him to calm him down, to make him feel heard. And that's what I did mostly.
Yeah.
I just listened to him. I let him talk.
Yep.
I let him talk about the issues that he had. And I let him understand that he was listening to someone who cared. I would tell him that. I care. Like, whether you think anyone else cares about you, I care about you. I do not want to respond out here to something more tragic.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, call. Because I care,
Yeah. Yeah.
And more than once when we got to the hospital, he'd be like, man, I love you, man. And
It's amazing the difference it can make. And I learned this from my experience with 911, and I would train new dispatchers on these types of calls by saying the biggest thing that you can do is talk to them like they're a person. Like, level with them. Hey, I'm a person, I have problems, but you're not here to hear about my problems, what you got going on, because I'm here to help you. Like,
Right.
we're on the same level. I'm not talking down to you. I'm not here
Right.
to educate you or lecture you or tell you, oh, that wasn't a good choice, or oh, you shouldn't have done that, and it's making your situation worse. Like, that's not what you're there for. Like, be a person. That's
And
what they need right now.
I'm not saying that you should feel like a bad person if you are annoyed sometimes.
No,
Because,
that's human too.
because the frequency of those calls was annoying.
Yeah, yeah,
It sometimes it was right in the middle of dinner. But it didn't matter because, like, I still understand that he's a person who's in crisis. And there's always something behind it. If you can try to put yourself in their position, or at least try to understand their perspective,
yeah,
it goes a long ways.
yeah,
And people can tell that you're trying to do that, and
yeah.
that makes them feel heard. And that's something that anyone
Yeah.
that can help anybody, no matter what. And then, of course, funding, like we talked about, funding for resources is important.
Yeah.
And I know that sometimes that's a political topic, but it's just the reality of our world.
Well, and for people who live in places where you can make a difference by voting. In
Hmm.
Ohio, the structure of passing things for more funding for schools was strictly up to a vote. They had to pass levies. And if people didn't want to pay more taxes on their properties, they'd just all go in and vote no for it. Well, that's great, but we're in an area that's primarily elderly people whose kids aren't in school, and now the schools aren't getting funded because they didn't want to pay more taxes.
Yeah.
And what is that doing to our society? What is it doing to our structure, our support, our, the future of
Yeah.
our community? And, if you're in a situation where you can vote to support those types of things, do the research and find out what the cause is. And if it's something worthy of paying a little extra taxes for, vote for it and support it.
Well, and that's another thing that education will help with. Understanding that funding education shouldn't only be important to you if you have kids in school. Understanding
Right.
that educating everybody helps everybody.
Yeah. These are our doctors that take
Right.
care of us when we get older.
And an
We're not just,
educated
yeah.
society is a better society. And anyone who is trying to reduce the number of educated people is trying to create people that they can control.
Yeah.
History has borne that out over and over again,
Yeah.
for sure. So, what can we do as individuals? For example, from an autistic perspective, some of the lessons that I've learned, especially understanding, like part of the reprocessing of my life after I was diagnosed, was understanding what was happening and what are some of the things that I did that helped that I didn't understand why it was helping necessarily. And one of the biggest things is giving yourself a break if you can.
Yeah.
If you're an autistic person and you're overwhelmed and you're dealing with depression and anxiety, give yourself a break.
If you
Understand
can,
that
or
that's
when
okay.
you can.
Yeah,
Because
if and when
sometimes you might
can.
not be able to right now, but in a few hours when you're not in that situation, then you can take a break. Like,
Yeah.
do it when you can.
For example, we have had a lot going on this week. We've had a lot going on this last month.
Yeah.
Starting the podcast, doing a lot of stuff. So I've felt very overwhelmed and overstimulated. And we've both been working a lot of overtime lately. And I just, coming into this weekend, I said, I need a break.
Yep.
I'm pushing myself too much. I'm going to, like, it's going to push towards a meltdown or a burnout or something. And that's going to be worse than taking a break. So I knew I just needed to take a break and not put myself on the overtime list for this weekend.
Yeah.
And that's, that's okay. And it's not even just a break from, work or whatever. A break from masking.
Yeah.
Take the mask off if nothing else, because that's overwhelming. That can cause. Take a break from being overstimulated. Find yourself a less stimulating environment. Kind of like we talked about, self-care for autistics sometimes is isolation
Yep.
to get rid of that stimulation.
Take a break from the itchy shirt that you have to wear as a uniform to your job. Like, just put on your favorite soft shirt or take your shirt off when you're at home and just be done with it. Like, take a break from whatever it is.
There are days where, like, when I'm already overstimulated, everything else, and I've told you before, like right now I'm living in a sensory hell. I can feel every seam in my shirt. I can feel a tag. I can feel like my shirt's just not sitting right. And when you're already overstimulated, every little thing adds to it.
Yeah.
So take a break from anything that you can do. Part of taking a break too is engaging in your special interests.
Yep.
That was one of the things I did this weekend. Is I played some video games that I hadn't played in a while.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of reading. I worked on the podcast, which is one of my special interests. I made a merch store,
Yep.
and kind of had fun playing with that too.
Yeah.
That was like, that helps.
Yeah.
It helps kind of drains your bucket. It helps you regulate things. It helps you feel happiness and joy, doing things that actually make you feel good again.
Yeah.
For sure. And allowing yourself to stim.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. When I was diagnosed and I realized that shaking my knee or tapping my pen or, different things that I did, when I realized those are stims, it got to where, like, some of my coworkers can you stop tapping? Nope. Sorry, I'm going to keep tapping because that's me stimming. And, like we've talked about before, I have those nice cube things, like the little squishy things. I don't think I brought one of them
They're
over
called
here.
Nido.
Ne-
Needoh.
Neato, is that what it was?
Oh,
Oh, is that what
yeah.
it was? Neato's the brand.
Nice cubes are
Nice
the square
Cube's just the
ones.
square
And then they
ones
have a
that I use,
gumdrop
the
one
cube
and a
ones.
bear
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
that's what it is. And Bridget just found some gumdrop ones at the store the other day and bought them, and those are pretty cool too. But that's something that I take to work, and I'll be sitting there fiddling with it, and it's a stem that I can do that's also not disruptive,
Yeah.
because I also don't want to draw attention
Right. Yeah,
to me.
you can, once you figure out what the stems are, sometimes you can find ways to
Yeah.
alleviate other people from the either like some people get like irritated or whatever, or distracted by certain noises that are stems. So you can maybe find ways to do
Yeah.
your stems still without disrupting other people.
Another common stem of mine is chewing on stuff. These water bottle lids.
It's terrible for your teeth.
Yeah. Straws.
Yeah.
I chew on straws. My pen caps, I'll chew on them.
Yep.
So I try to keep gum with me at work so that I have something to chew on that's meant to be chewed on and
Yeah.
not like disruptive or draws attention to me or whatever. But yeah,
Or causes you to go to the dentist, which you also hate.
right. Yep.
You're like, okay, mom.
Yeah.
Sorry. I usually don't say stuff
I
like that.
What are some things that a neuro anchor? Have we talked about that on here yet? We haven't.
No, we haven't. So
Go ahead and
I said to Keith the other day, I said, we need to come up with a term for the support person or the partner or whoever it is that supports autistic people. We needed to,
because usually it's spouse, partner,
Yeah,
parent,
yeah.
caregiver.
we need to come up with like a term, like a fun little word for it. And so we kind of started tossing some ideas around and we came up with neuro anchor. And there's like a definition of it and he'll throw it up on the,
Some of it's I made some merch based on that.
Yeah.
And I made a post on our Facebook page, and we'll
Yeah.
put links to all of this in the show notes too. But yeah,
but basically the idea of it is like the person that's the calm and the steady and there for support.
they're not there to steer.
Yeah.
It's
Not
like,
there to
it's
guide
like
or
you're-
steer
yeah,
or
you're just providing
direct.
steady
Just
support and
steady support, just to be the
kind of just to anchor
constant.
things.
Yep.
So from the perspective of a neuro anchor,
Yes.
what are some things that
One of the big things that I think is over time in the relationship, whatever it is, friendship, neighbor, marriage, whatever the relationship is, over time, building trust and communication. I think ahead of time, not in those stressful situations, but having that trust and communication established, knowing how the person communicates, and just showing that person that they can trust you and rely on you when they need it, and learning how they communicate. So when you're in those situations, you can, figure out what they need by communicating with them in the way that they're best at communicating.
yeah.
And like I said, that's before issues arise. Because if you're trying to figure out how to communicate with them while they're already in burnout,
Yeah.
then you're going to have other issues because
Yeah.
they don't know how to do that.
They're
in that
already
moment.
melted down.
Yeah.
They're already
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
And then recognizing their emotions, just like being aware and kind of picking up on we talked about it in one of the previous episodes, but picking up on the rumbles, like being familiar with the signs that, we're not there yet, but we might be headed towards a meltdown if we don't change some things.
right.
Understanding what their triggers are, kind of the same thing. And just constant reassurance that you aren't going away. It's like I kind of talked about earlier, is like constantly being held to the standard of people from your past that have left or not supported you when things got hard, and you kind of sometimes just deciding that I was going to do the same thing, and just reassuring you that I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm not going to go away. And
And it's not me deciding that you're going to do the same thing. It's me having a fear
right,
that you're
because
going to
that's
do
your
the same
experience.
thing, and that's the difference that you need to see, and that others need to see, is
Yeah.
that this isn't them saying they don't trust you. it's their fear that they've trusted other
Yeah.
people and those people still let them
Yeah.
down.
My experience shows me that in these situations, I'm gonna be let down, and having patience for that,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not judging you based off of others. They're bracing themselves for an experience that they're familiar with. And you just got to show them that this isn't this experience they're familiar with.
Because again,
I'm not
pattern
going to leave.
recognition is a big thing that's strong with us.
Yeah.
And so if you have a pattern of these are people I should have been able to trust, and I did trust, and I believed that I had every reason to trust them, and then they let me down, or they were taking advantage of me all along, or all that, it makes it harder. And again, it's not your fault, and it's not necessarily fair that you have to reassure me more than maybe most people.
Yeah.
But it's also not my fault,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And
that, I think that's the biggest thing. And I've even said to you before, it's not fair that you're judging me based off of other people's actions. And it's not fair at all, but I understand it more now.
Right.
And I don't take it as you judging me.
right, understanding it's not a judgment of you.
Right. Right. When emotions are high, sometimes you can take things personally, but
Right.
Thinking about it outside of the situation, when emotions aren't quite so high, like logically, I know it's not based on anything I did.
Right.
So it's just based on what you've come to expect and people have shown you over time.
And we've been together 15 years now.
Yeah.
There's not as much of that issue anymore because
Right.
like you have shown me over and over and over again through crisis situation after crisis situation, because I'm not different now than how I used to be because we've not had hard times. Like we've had hard times too.
Yeah.
And you've stayed around even through those, because those are the situations that the previous pattern tells me when those happen, you'll say, see ya.
Yeah.
And we've had enough of our own difficulties and hard times that, I understand that now.
Yeah. Well, and your mentality going into situations that might become difficult now, I've noticed in recent years has shifted more to, okay, we're upset right now, but we'll figure this out.
Yeah.
Like one way or another, we'll figure it out. It's just a matter of, cooling off and figuring out what our plan is. But I think even in those situations now, you would say, yeah, we'll figure this out. I just can't right now.
Yeah.
So it shifts over time, but it does take time to prove it. And the consistent, reassuring, I say consistent, but I'm not saying constant. You don't have to constantly tell somebody, oh, I'm not going to go anywhere. Just like when the need arises, when you feel like the reassurance is appropriate, when they're feeling insecure or something like that, it doesn't hurt to reassure them. You know what? I'm here for you. I'm not going anywhere.
Sometimes that needs to be explicit, and sometimes just your actions show that too.
Right. Yep. And one of the other things is to openly advocate for them in ways that they can see it. So, like learning about their challenges, speaking out to people in their lives about their challenges.
That is one of the best ways that you can show them that you have their back, that you are their support, that you're there for them. Because a lot of times when we're dealing with those situations, we can't advocate for ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And someone like me, like I grew up being taught that I wasn't allowed to advocate for myself, basically.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm better at advocating for myself. But if I'm close to a meltdown or I'm having a really bad situation, seeing you advocate for me when I'm not in a position to, it helps build that trust more. It lets me know that that you're in my corner and I am heard and I am understood and I am a priority.
Yeah. And that's a tough one for me because I'm more of a reserved person. I'm not super outspoken. I'm not like conflict. I'm not great at, or not one that likes to face conflict head on or.
Well, and like there were times when we would have issues with the boys when they are growing up, and I would be getting after them about something and you would be quiet. And then after I was gone, you would talk to them about it, and you'd tell me later, I backed you up, I defended you to them, and I'd be like, okay, I need you to do that when I'm there.
Yeah.
I need to see that myself
Yeah.
too, and I need them to see me seeing it. Like
Yeah.
it makes me feel like they understand we're more of a team, but it just helps me know, it
Yeah.
helps reassure me
I
that
think I've gotten better over
yeah,
time, but I mean, there's still probably things that could be improved. I could
hmm
do better, but yeah, it's understandable if that one's a struggle for people, but
yeah,
work on it. That I would just encourage you to work on it. Find ways that you can advocate for them that aren't so out of your comfort zone that you can't do it. And then as you do it more,
hmm
maybe bigger things will become more comfortable, or more possible,
yeah.
even. And then being the calm in the storm, like when the storm's roaring and
Yeah.
the wind's raging, like just be the calm and the steady
This is definitely
person.
where the neuro anchor imagery
Yeah,
comes in.
yeah,
When there's a storm hitting the seas, you want to be anchored. You want to be, out, not in dock or anything, but you want to be anchored, and you want to be able to have,
yeah,
you know, something to hold you steady through the storm. And
yeah,
that's definitely, caretakers and whatever, being that neuro anchor is the biggest thing. Being there.
yeah,
I, I've said it before, and I'll say it over and again. Like, the biggest thing you've done for me is just being there.
yeah,
The best thing you've done for me is just being there and showing me that you're gonna stay there. You're
yeah,
gonna continue to be there. That's been the biggest difference.
yeah.
And knowing that you're always gonna be there and you're gonna back me up and you're gonna support me is what allows me to take the risks and take the chances
Yeah.
and
And that's probably like the easiest thing on the list to do is just to be present. Like,
well, I mean, I'm sure there's been plenty of times where it wasn't as easy to just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna, be here. But
oh, for sure. And
well,
that was kind of my post earlier on the Facebook page, with about the neuro anchor is self-care too. Like,
yeah,
be true to yourself. You're not selling your whole soul to taking care of your autistic loved one. Like, that's not what
yeah,
being a neuro anchor is about. You have to be strong and take care of yourself to be able to be that person for them. But it's support.
hmm
Like, in our situation, and for kids, it's a little different, but I'm your support person. You're an adult, so you still make adult
hmm
decisions. You still live your own life. And if you want to do something that I don't want to do, you can still,
right,
like, I'm not treating you like you're a
right.
child
You're not
or I'm a
parenting me.
parent. Yeah,
You're not controlling me. You're not directing me. You're
yeah,
not steering me.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think that's an important thing to say is like, my biggest job is to just take care of myself and so I can be here for you.
and
And
and I mean that's what spouses are,
yeah.
and autistic people are just as capable of doing that for their neuro anchors.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a hot mess
And
and you support me. So,
I mean, we can be there for each other for sure.
yeah.
But yeah, it is important for you to focus on self-care, because like
Yeah.
you said in the post, or maybe it was in a comment to somebody, that you're not in the best position to help me if you're a mess. Like, if
Yeah.
you're not taking care of yourself, you can't help other people.
Right. Right.
It's just like, in firefighting. If I'm not being safe in going in to try to save someone, then I'm not going to be able to save them, and I'm also probably going to
Get hurt
get
yourself.
hurt or
Yeah.
killed myself.
Right.
So, like, you still have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
You can't help others if
Put
you
on your oxygen mask first.
right. There you go. Very good. And then the biggest thing is seeking evidence-based, science-based treatments.
Yes.
And it's kind of a tricky world here, because cognitive behavioral therapy is common for any mental health
Yeah.
issues, and it can still be a good treatment for people who are dealing with depression or anxiety and who are autistic. It's just important for the clinician to understand, how that might make things a little bit different, or how
Yeah.
it might
So
whatever,
they can adjust.
so they can adjust the
Yeah.
treatment, right? But it can still be a good treatment.
And I think that goes for like any type of therapy.
Mhm.
I think that like I'm not neurodivergent, but I used EMDR for my trauma therapy, and it changed my life. It completely made a world of difference for me. And EMDR, if you don't know, just quickly, you might have to look up the details, but it focuses on like the eye movements, and there's different methods of doing it, either flashing lights or vibrating things on both sides, or you can do tapping. But it helps connect, they say with trauma that it separates the left and right sides of your brain, and it helps to reconnect the logic in the situation with the trauma that you've experienced so that you can reapply the logic in those situations. That made a complete world of difference for me after like 7 years of therapy. 6 months of EMDR was
Yeah, it was life
it
changing
was
for you for
huge.
sure.
It was huge. And then you tried EMDR and just couldn't get on board
Yeah,
with it.
it just didn't.
But I know there's other autistic people that have done EMDR and it works for them. It's like with any kind of, as long as the person you're working with is aware that you're neurodivergent and they're familiar with that, I don't think the method matters as much
Yeah.
as what works for you.
Yeah, understanding what works for you, and it's important that they understand how to tell how it's working for you.
Yeah.
You know, like there's different cues that a neurodivergent person would give maybe than a neurotypical person
Right.
would give. Just understanding that intersection is what's important.
Yeah.
For sure.
I definitely think so.
So again, it's kind of a heavy topic that we've been talking about. There's so much
Yeah.
that you can read about and talk about. Like I said, I'm going to put links to everything that we referenced in the show notes. I try to put a references section in the show notes when I am able to, that looks like some sort of proper bibliography or something to give the information. I'm going to try to do that too, but I'm mainly just the links to everything in the show notes. I'm going to try to do so that you can read these things, because there's so much more from all of these sources that I used.
Yeah.
That you can read more.
If you know of a resource that for autistic people in these types of situations, share link, phone number, hotline, whatever you have, like share it in the notes. Let's help our community and give people more resources, because the more you have ahead of time,
The only
better.
thing I will say is I would make sure you, both for your own education and for sharing information with other people, make sure they're resources that involve autistic people. So it's important to look for resources from actually autistic voices,
Yeah.
actually autistic people.
Agreed.
That's important. That was the reason we wanted to do this podcast, is
Yeah.
to give people another actually autistic voice
Yeah.
to listen to, because it's important. And like you said, leave us your comments, though, thoughts, ideas. If you disagree with me, let me know. People have commented disagreement with me on some of my posts on Facebook. I do not take offense to that at all. I will have a discussion with you about it. If we have to agree to disagree, that's fine too. I
Yeah.
will not look down on anybody.
You're probably not going to change his mind, but he'll converse with you about it.
If you can give me a resource
Yeah,
or
you
information,
will.
like I'm
You
not
have
so
changed your mind
stubborn.
on
Yeah, I'm not
things.
so stubborn that like I won't change my mind with evidence. But
Right. Usually when you talk about things,
the
because you've
urgency of
researched.
your message to me won't change my mind.
Yeah.
The information can.
Right. Yep.
And speaking of interacting with people, I did have one person reach out to me the other night, who was like, we didn't do the show because of this, but it's just interesting the timing, who is autistic or neurodivergent and dealing with
Feeling
depression
down and
feeling
struggling
lonely
with some
and
life
feeling
things. Yeah.
and I'm not saying that I'm someone that knows exactly what to say to you,
Yeah.
but I'm willing to listen. I'm
Yeah.
willing to read. I'm willing to converse with people. And the best advice that I can give, and this is only based on my experience, is simply just keep going. Because their question was, what do I do? I don't know your situation good enough to give you specific things. I don't have enough training
Yeah.
to be able to give any kind of professional advice. But from my own personal experience, what I've told a lot of people, and this is whether you're autistic or not, if you're dealing with things, just keep going.
Yeah.
Because I've been in those situations where I was 100% alone. I went through a time when I was going through a divorce, and at the same time, my family had disowned me because I had left the religion that I was raised in. I had nobody. And it was extremely hard. And I'm not going to say that I know exactly how anyone else feels because I went through that. But there were days where my only goal was to make it through the day.
Yeah.
But that was still a goal. And if you're down to that, if that's the only goal you can set that goal. Make it through the day. And then the next day comes, make it through that day.
Yeah. One day at a time.
And just keep going.
Sometimes it's 1 hour at a time. Like you just, okay, what do we have to do to get through this day? Like,
and I can't guarantee it's, how quick it's going to get better. I can't guarantee that you're ever going to get to what you want, but I can guarantee that if you give up, you will never get, things don't get better when you give up.
Yeah.
You have to keep going if you want things to get better.
Right.
I can't guarantee you when that's going to happen or if it's going to happen or how it's going to happen, but I can guarantee you it won't if you don't keep going.
Yep. One foot in front of the other. And, it's like I say to the kids, and like somebody important in my life always told me, it's kind of my mantra, and hopefully the kids say this at my funeral, but I always take the attitude in situations of we'll figure it out, because some way we always do. Yeah. Some way. It's just somehow we always figure it out.
Yep. So that's our not professional advice. That's definitely just from our own personal experience. Yeah. I think it's valid.
And, I'm kind of the same way. Like, I can listen and I'm willing to listen. So if one of us shows up as online and you want to just talk, we're both pretty good at listening.
We also, if we show up online but we're not responding, it's not necessarily because we're just ignoring you.
No.
We both sometimes will have our phones on us at work, but we can get busy at work.
Yeah.
Or we might be at home, but we're not so please don't ever feel like you're being ignored or we don't feel like responding to someone if we're not responding. I don't have a problem talking with people at all, but I may not be available all the time.
Yeah.
So,
one of the things that, and I'm just going to throw this out there because I think it's a good idea, is that my son's counselor told him at one point when he was struggling really hard, she sat down with him and made him enter in his phone, in the memory, mental health hotline phone number.
mm-hmm.
While he wasn't in one of those deepest, darkest moments, it was in his phone, so he knew it was there. So that when he got to those deepest, darkest moments, he wasn't faced with having to find that number and figure out what he was going to do. He had somebody to talk to, and it was already saved in his phone. So, it's something I, recommend. Look at the resources, find something, save it in your phone so that you have somebody to talk to in those times.
I've called one of those hotlines before.
Yeah. That's what they're there for.
Yeah. And it may be someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know anything about your situation, but it is someone who wants to help you and wants to listen.
Yep.
That's their whole point in being there. They're often volunteers, so it's not even like, oh, I'm just here to make some money. They're people who genuinely want to help people.
But they're also highly trained. They're like mental health trained. It's not just like volunteers from the street that is like, oh, I'll take that call, and they're not prepared for it. So, but yeah, I would encourage, if you struggle, to save that number in your phone. You can save it under Great Grandma Mildred if you want to, so nobody knows that that's what it is, but put it there ahead of time, just so you have it when you need it and aren't ready. You're not in a mental place to find it.
Well, and like you've said, when it comes to counselors, we both are strong proponents of the idea that everyone can use a counselor. Everyone could benefit from therapy. And it's important to establish yourself with a counselor before you have a crisis.
Yeah.
If you can establish yourself with a counselor so that when something comes up, you already have someone you can go to.
Yeah.
versus waiting for yourself to be in crisis. And then, especially when
Having
you're
to try to
autistic
figure it out then.
and you're in crisis, you can be completely paralyzed
Yeah.
and unable to seek. Like we've had situations like that where I've been in crisis and I've basically told you, if you don't call and set up something for me, it's not going to happen
Yeah.
because I just can't.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a good idea to
Plan
establish
ahead.
yourself
Yep.
with someone ahead of time. Okay, so
Well,
I
Yep.
think we'll wrap up this week's episode.
Yep.
Just another reminder: check out our merch store. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yep.
Again,
Like,
this is not
comment,
us saying give us a
subscribe.
lot of money. Just if nothing else, check out the fun stuff I'm in.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like Bridget
Share.
said, like, comment, subscribe, share with anyone who you think this might resonate with or help or benefit.
Yep.
And next week, I'm going to be interviewing Bridget as a neuro anchor. And
be
we'll talk a
interesting.
little bit about, like, her background and her, a little bit about her and then more about our story and kind of,
Yep.
this is kind of like testing out the interviewing kind of
Format.
and seeing how well that goes.
Y'all can get to know me a little better.
If next week it doesn't end up being me interviewing her, it didn't go well and we decided to do something else. So anyways, all right, well, we'll wrap up this episode for this
Yep.
week and we'll see you all later.
Yep. Have a good week.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider for diagnosis or treatment of autism or related condition.